My mother slid the paper across the kitchen table like it was a grocery list. She didn't look at me when she did it. She just pushed it forward and waited. I looked down. It was a medical consent form. Pre-filled. My name was already on it. That's when I realized something was very wrong. I should give you some context, but not much. Because the truth is, this story doesn't need a lot of setup. You'll understand it as it moves. I'm the younger of 2 daughters. My sister, Dina, is 4 years older. She married young, married well, at least that's how my parents describe it. Her husband comes from money. Old money. The quiet kind that doesn't need to announce itself. They have a house in a neighborhood where the lawns are always green even in drought season. They go on 3 vacations a year. And for the past 2 years, they had been trying to have a child. Dina had a condition. I won't go into the medical details because they don't matter for what I'm about to tell you. What matters is that carrying a pregnancy was considered risky for her. Her doctor had told her that clearly. And so, somewhere in the planning that happened without me, my family had decided that I would carry the baby instead. I was not asked. I was informed. That evening, after the paper was pushed across the table, my mother explained it to me the way you explain a schedule change. My sister and her husband had already consulted a specialist. The legal documents were being drafted. The family had agreed this was the right thing to do. It was, my mother said, what family does for each other. I was 26 years old. I had a job. I had an apartment 20 minutes away that I was still furnishing. I had a body that was mine. I said I needed time to think. My mother said, there isn't much time to think. The specialist has an opening next month. I didn't argue. I'm not someone who argues in the moment. I've learned that arguing in the moment only gives people a chance to out-talk you. So I folded the paper and put it in my bag and I drove home. That night I sat with it. The form. The fact that my name had been written on it by someone else's hand. The fact that a timeline had been built around my body without my knowledge. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just a clumsy way of raising the topic. Maybe the next conversation would be gentler, more of a question than a demand. 2 days later, my aunt called me. She said she was proud of me for agreeing to do this. She said Dina and her husband were so relieved. She said the family was finally coming together. I hadn't agreed to anything. That same week, my cousin texted me. Then my father called. Each conversation slightly different but carrying the same message underneath. This was already happening. My role in it was settled. What remained was simply my cooperation. I noticed something during those calls. No one asked how I felt. Not one person. They asked about my health history, my schedule, whether my doctor was local. They were gathering information. But they never once stopped to say, "Is this okay with you?" I started paying attention more carefully. I noticed that Dina never called me herself. Not once. Every contact came through someone else. My mother. My aunt. Her husband sent one text, formal, almost corporate, thanking me in advance. Thanking me. In advance. I noticed that when I mentioned having questions about the process, my mother's voice tightened. She said, "Don't make this complicated." Just that. Don't make this complicated. I noticed the form had a signature line at the bottom. And beneath the signature line, in very small print, was a reference to a secondary document. Page 4. I had to squint to read it. I didn't have page 4. I asked my mother about it. She said it was just standard paperwork. Legal language. She said her friend's daughter had signed the same kind of form and it was nothing to worry about. She said I was overthinking. I told her I'd like to see it anyway. She said she'd ask Dina's husband. That was 3 weeks ago. Page 4 had not arrived. I stopped asking about it out loud. But I didn't stop thinking about it. Something about the way she'd said just standard paperwork, too quickly, too smooth, stayed with me. Something about the fact that every person in my family had found time to call me, but no one had found time to send me the complete document. I'm not a suspicious person by nature. I'm not someone who assumes the worst. But I know what it looks like when people are managing you instead of talking to you. So I stopped reacting. And I started watching. Here's the thing about people who are hiding something. They get comfortable. They start to believe their own management of you is working. And when they believe that, they get sloppy. I got page 4 on a Tuesday. Not from my mother. Not from Dina's husband. I got it from my cousin Ronia, who had no idea she was handing me the most important piece of paper I'd ever hold. She'd been CC'd on an email chain, a long one, going back months, and she forwarded it to me thinking it was just the medical summary everyone had been referencing. It wasn't just the medical summary. I remember sitting at my kitchen table when I opened the attachment. It was early. I had coffee. The morning light was coming in sideways through the blinds the way it does in autumn when the sun sits lower. It was a quiet, ordinary moment. And then I started reading. Page 4 was a financial and legal rider attached to the surrogacy agreement. Standard surrogacy contracts do include these. I know that now, I didn't know it then. But what was in this one was not standard. Not even close. The document outlined a compensation structure. Except the compensation wasn't going to me. It was going to my parents. A lump sum, paid in 2 installments, one at confirmation of pregnancy, one at live birth. The amount was significant. I won't say the exact number, but it was enough to pay off the remaining mortgage on my parents' house. Which, I would later confirm, was something they had been quietly struggling with for 2 years. I read it 3 times. Then I sat very still for a while. I want to be honest about what that moment felt like, because I think it matters. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even shock, not exactly. It was something colder and quieter than both of those things. It was the specific feeling of understanding something you had been half knowing for a while but hadn't let yourself fully see. My body. My risk. My recovery time. My career paused. Their mortgage cleared. I kept reading. Further into the document, there was a clause about the surrogate, me, referred to only as the carrier, waiving rights to any additional compensation claims. Another clause outlined that the carrier's family had entered into this agreement as co-signatories, meaning my parents had already signed. Their signatures were on page 4. Dated 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. While I was being eased into the idea. While phone calls were being made and aunts were telling me how proud they were. While my mother was telling me not to make things complicated, the signatures were already there. The money was already arranged. They hadn't been asking me. They had been waiting for me to catch up to a decision that had already been made. I closed the laptop. I went and stood at my window for a few minutes. Just looked outside. A neighbor was walking a dog. A kid was riding a bike in slow, lazy circles. Everything outside looked completely normal. Inside, I was reorganizing everything I understood about my family. I thought about Dina. I genuinely did not know how much she knew. Part of me wanted to believe she didn't know about the financial arrangement. Part of me suspected she knew everything and had simply chosen not to look at it too closely. Either way, I realized it didn't matter right now. What mattered was the document in front of me. I photographed every page. 12 photos. Clear and time-stamped. I emailed them to myself. I saved them to cloud storage. I texted them to a number only I have access to. I printed 2 copies and put one in a folder in my apartment and mailed the other to myself so it would arrive with a postal timestamp. I had learned, somewhere, I think from watching too many true crime documentaries, which now felt oddly useful, that the most important thing about evidence is that it exists in more than one place. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my friend Sana. Sana is a family law paralegal. We went to university together. We had drifted the way people do when life gets busy, but we had always been the kind of friends where the gap didn't matter. I told her I needed to ask her something and that I needed her to be honest with me. She said, always. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, send me everything. She called back 2 hours later. Her voice was careful. Professional. She said what I had was real, that the contract had significant legal problems, that the co-signatory structure around a third party, me, without my documented informed consent was not just ethically wrong. It was legally questionable. Possibly actionable. She said I needed to speak with a solicitor. She had someone in mind. I said I would. But not yet. Because there was one thing I needed to understand before I moved. I needed to know how far this went. Whether this was desperation, parents drowning in debt making a terrible decision, or whether this was something colder, more calculated. I needed to know if Dina's husband had constructed this knowing exactly what he was doing. I started going back through the email chain Ronia had forwarded. I read every message from the beginning. By the time I reached the end, I had my answer. And it was worse than I'd thought. Confronting them would have ruined everything. I want to tell you something about silence. People misread it. They see someone go quiet and they think, good, they've accepted it. Good, they've settled down. Good, we've managed them. My family saw my silence over those next 2 weeks and they relaxed. My mother called twice and both times I was warm. Normal. I asked how she was sleeping. I asked about her garden. I said I was still thinking about everything and that I just needed a little more time. She sounded relieved. She had no idea what I was doing with that time. The email chain told me everything I needed. Going back to the very beginning, 4 months before that paper was slid across the kitchen table, I could see the architecture of the whole thing. Dina's husband, Kareem, had initiated the conversation. He had written to my parents directly. Not to me. Not even to Dina first, based on the timestamps. To my parents. His email was polite. Measured. But underneath the politeness was a structure that I recognized once I knew to look for it. He had opened by mentioning the mortgage. Casually, sympathetically, I know things have been difficult, and I want you to know we think of you as family. Then he had moved to Dina's condition. Then, in the same email, almost in the same breath, he had introduced the idea of a family surrogate. He had connected those two things deliberately. My parents had responded within the hour. I read their reply and I had to set my phone down. Not from anger. From something more like grief. Because the reply wasn't calculating. It was grateful. Eager. It was the response of two people who were frightened about money and had suddenly been handed what felt like a solution. They weren't cold people engineering something. They were scared people who had let someone else do the engineering for them. That distinction mattered to me. It still does. But it didn't change what I had to do. I met Sana's contact, a family solicitor named Mr. Osei, on a Thursday afternoon. His office was quiet, book-lined, the kind of place that feels deliberately unhurried. He read through everything I had brought. He asked calm, specific questions. He didn't react dramatically to anything. That steadiness made me trust him immediately. He confirmed what Sana had told me. The contract had real legal problems. The financial arrangement, structured the way it was, without my knowledge or consent, crossed several lines. The co-signatory clause, my parents signing on behalf of an adult third party, was particularly problematic. He said that in his opinion, the person most exposed in this situation was Kareem, because the paper trail showed he had initiated and structured the agreement. My parents had followed. There was a difference, legally, between those two positions. He asked me what outcome I wanted. I thought about it carefully before I answered. I didn't want my parents prosecuted. I didn't want a public explosion that would humiliate everyone and leave the family in ruins. I didn't want revenge in the loud, burning sense of the word. What I wanted was simple. I wanted the contract void. I wanted documentation that I had never consented. I wanted it on record, formally, so that no version of this could be quietly restarted after things cooled down. And I wanted Kareem to understand, clearly, with witnesses, with paperwork in the room, that what he had done had been seen, named, and recorded. Mr. Osei said he could help me with all of that. We spent the next week preparing. He drafted a formal letter, not threatening, not dramatic, just precise, that outlined the legal concerns with the contract and requested an urgent meeting with all parties. The letter was written in the kind of language that makes clear, without shouting, that the person holding the pen knows exactly what they're talking about. Meanwhile, I prepared my own folder. Everything organized. Time-stamped photographs. The email chain printed in order. A written timeline I had constructed from memory, noting every phone call, every conversation, every date that a family member had contacted me, and what they had said. I kept a log. I'd been keeping it since the night I first read page 4. I also made sure something else was in order. I had a doctor's letter. My own GP, who I had visited for a routine appointment, and during which I had, without drama, without alarm, mentioned that I was feeling pressured by family regarding a medical procedure I had not consented to. My doctor had documented the visit. She had noted my emotional state as calm but concerned. She had written, in her clinical notes, that I had explicitly stated I had not given informed consent to the procedure being discussed. That letter was in my folder. 3 layers of protection. The contract itself. The email chain. The medical record. I was ready. The meeting was set for a Saturday morning. Neutral location, Mr. Osei's office. My mother thought it was a family mediation about the misunderstanding. Kareem had been told, by his own solicitor who Mr. Osei had contacted directly, that attendance was strongly advised. Dina called me the night before. It was the first time she had called me herself, not through my mother, not through Kareem, since all of this had begun. Her voice was different. Quieter. She said she just wanted to hear my voice. I said I was fine. She said she was sorry things had gotten so complicated. I said I knew. I meant it. We talked for about 12 minutes. About nothing important. About a restaurant we used to go to when we were teenagers. About how the summers felt longer when we were children. When we hung up, I sat quietly for a while. Then I checked my folder one more time. Everything was there. I set it by the door. Got into bed. They thought it was just another day. It wasn't. I woke up early that Saturday. Not because of anxiety. I had actually slept better than I had in weeks. There's something about having done the preparation, really done it, thoroughly and carefully, that quiets the mind in a way that nothing else can. I had made my decisions. The folder was by the door. What came next was simply the moment catching up to everything that had already been decided. I made coffee. Stood at my window the way I'd been doing a lot lately. The street was still half asleep. A few joggers. A man walking slowly with his hands in his pockets. The ordinary world doing its ordinary things, completely unaware. I showered. Got dressed. Wore something simple and neat, not formal, not casual. The kind of outfit that says I am calm and I am serious without having to say anything at all. I picked up the folder. And I left. Mr. Osei's office felt different with people in it. My parents arrived first. My mother was dressed like she was going to a formal lunch. She hugged me at the door. Her perfume was the same one she'd worn my whole life, and for just a second, just one, I felt the full weight of what this was. Not just a legal meeting. A family. A history. Years of Sunday dinners and school runs, and a woman who had held my hand through every difficult thing I'd faced growing up. Doing this to me without meaning to cause harm because she was frightened and someone had offered her a way out. I hugged her back. Properly. Then I sat down. Kareem arrived 7 minutes late. He came with his own solicitor, a sharp-looking woman who assessed the room immediately and quietly. Kareem himself looked controlled. Confident, even. The kind of confidence that comes from believing you are the smartest person in the room and that the meeting ahead is merely a formality you'll navigate smoothly. He shook Mr. Osei's hand. Nodded at me. Sat down. Dina wasn't there. We had agreed, Mr. Osei and I, that her presence wasn't necessary. This wasn't about Dina. Mr. Osei opened the meeting the way he did everything, quietly, without theater. He thanked everyone for coming. He explained that the purpose of the meeting was to address several legal and ethical concerns regarding a surrogacy agreement that had been prepared and partially executed without the documented informed consent of the proposed surrogate. He used my name. He used Kareem's name. He used the word executed. I watched Kareem's jaw tighten slightly. Just slightly. His solicitor opened her notepad. Mr. Osei placed 3 documents on the table. He slid a copy to each party. He gave everyone a moment to look. My mother opened hers slowly. I watched her eyes move across the page. I watched the moment she understood what she was looking at. The financial arrangement. The 2 installments. The mortgage figure. Her own signature. I watched her face go through several things at once: recognition, confusion, and then something that looked very much like shame. She didn't look at Kareem. She looked at me. I held her gaze gently. I didn't look away. I didn't look angry. I just looked at her steadily, the way you look at someone you love who has made a terrible mistake and you need them to understand that you know, fully, what happened, and that the knowing doesn't end the love, but it does end the silence. Her eyes filled. She didn't say anything. Mr. Osei continued. He walked through the email chain. Calmly. Chronologically. He noted the dates. He noted who had written to whom. He noted the language used, the way the financial arrangement and the surrogacy request had been introduced in the same communication. He noted the timeline between that first email and the evening a pre-filled consent form had been placed in front of me. He then placed my GP's letter on the table. He read one sentence from it aloud. Just one. That I had presented to my physician expressing that I felt pressured regarding a medical procedure to which I had not consented. That this had been documented. Kareem's solicitor leaned over and the 2 of them exchanged 3 quiet words. Then Kareem spoke for the first time. His voice was even. Measured. He said there had been a miscommunication. That the financial arrangement was meant as a gift to my parents, unrelated to the surrogacy. That he had assumed I was being kept informed throughout the process. Mr. Osei let him finish. Then, without raising his voice even slightly, he placed one final document on the table. A printed copy of an email. One specific email, from the chain, in which Kareem had written, in his own words, "It's better we keep the compensation structure between us for now, until she's further along in the process." Until she's further along in the process. Me. I was she. And keeping it from me had been a conscious choice, written down, dated, sent. The room was very quiet. Kareem's solicitor put her pen down. Just set it on the notepad. A small gesture that somehow said everything. Mr. Osei said that in light of the documentation, he was formally requesting that the surrogacy agreement be declared void. That a signed acknowledgement of that nullification be provided by all parties before the end of the meeting. That the financial arrangement between Kareem and my parents be dissolved and documented as dissolved. And that a letter be placed on file confirming that I had never given informed consent at any stage. He said these were the terms. He said if the terms were not agreed to today, the next communication would come from a different kind of office. He didn't specify which kind. He didn't need to. The signing took about 20 minutes. My parents signed immediately. My mother's hand was trembling slightly. My father, who had barely spoken since arriving, signed his name and then sat back and stared at the table. He looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had only just realized the weight of it. Kareem took longer. His solicitor spoke quietly to him. He listened. He asked 2 questions I couldn't hear. Then he picked up the pen and signed. Slowly. Deliberately. The way someone signs something when they want to give the impression they are choosing it freely, even when everyone in the room knows they are not. When it was done, Mr. Osei collected the documents and thanked everyone for their cooperation. That was it. No shouting. No confrontation in the car park. No final speeches. No dramatic last words. Just a room of people who had arrived with different understandings of the situation and were leaving with only one. My mother called me that evening. I let it ring twice before I answered. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed 2 rings worth of quiet before the next part began. She didn't try to explain herself. I was grateful for that. She just said she was sorry. In a voice stripped of everything performative, everything managed. Just sorry. Just her voice, tired and small, saying the word like she meant every syllable of it. I said I knew. I said I needed some time. She said she understood. We stayed on the phone for a few seconds without speaking. The kind of silence that isn't empty, that's actually full of things that don't have words yet but will, eventually, when enough time has passed. Then I said goodnight. And she said goodnight. And I hung up. I sat on my sofa for a while after that. Folder on the coffee table. Cold cup of tea I'd forgotten to drink. The evening settling in through the windows. I thought about Dina. I thought about my parents. I thought about the version of my family that existed before that paper was pushed across the kitchen table, and the version that existed now, not destroyed, not the same, but somewhere in the difficult space between those two things where real life actually happens. I thought about the fact that no one had asked if I was okay. And then I thought about the fact that I was. Not because everything was resolved. Not because the hurt had already healed. But because I had moved through something with my eyes open and my hands steady, and I had come out the other side still recognizably myself. Still in possession of my own story. That mattered more than I expected it to. I reached over and turned off the lamp. Outside, a car passed slowly. Someone laughed on the street below. A dog barked once and then stopped. That night, everything was quiet.